Welcome. Today we're diving into a concern that many electric vehicle, EV drivers share, the fear of being stranded with a dead battery. Imagine cruising down the road, only to have your EV suddenly stop because there's no charge left. It's a situation no driver wants to face. That's why people usually plan their EV trips carefully, mapping out where and when they'll recharge. But what happens when that plan fails? What really happens when the battery hits zero? To find out, we decided to push several electric cars to their absolute limits. We drove them until they could go no further, observing how each vehicle behaved in the final minutes of power. Our experiment took place at the ADAC Mobility Test Center in Penzing, a former airfield with nearly 2 kilometers of open runway, perfect for a controlled, high-stress driving test. We tested a range of popular electric vehicles: the Kia EV6, Neo, BYD, Tesla, Volkswagen, and Volvo. The mission was clear. We wanted to see not only how far each EV could go before shutting down, but also if any of them still had a little energy left in reserve once their display hit 0%. Each car was driven freely until the battery reached 20%. From that point, we drove them at a steady 100 km/h, carefully recording any warnings, speed changes, or unusual behavior. The test ended when the car could no longer maintain a speed of at least 50 km/h. At that point, we also tried restarting the vehicle to see if it had any remaining power. To make sure nothing was missed, we mounted multiple cameras inside and outside each vehicle. I personally joined Sven Hansen in the Kia EV6, while other members of our team followed the remaining vehicles. It's worth noting that all the EVs were brand new, though only Tesla and Volkswagen had been previously tested by ADAC. We made sure every car started at a similar point. Each had a comparable range left when they hit 20% battery. At that mark, Tesla was leading with 95 kilometers remaining. Most of the others showed between 70 and 85 kilometers left. Volvo was the lowest, with just 60 kilometers to go. Interestingly, none of the cars issued serious warnings at this stage, which makes sense. Under normal circumstances, that range would still be enough to reach a nearby charging station. No significant performance variations occurred between 20% and 10%. No serious warnings, acceleration, or air conditioning issues occurred. Below 10%, everything changed. Warning lights went red, messages became more urgent, and some automobiles gave advice, like the BYD charging or the bio-reducing air conditioner consumption. Despite these cautions, none of the cars performed poorly at 100 km/h. Even with significantly slower acceleration, the VW could cruise beyond 100 km/h. Changes were increasingly obvious as we neared the crucial zone, 5% and lower. The Kia's throttle responsiveness decreased, and it repeatedly reminded us to charge. Even while it could still go 100 km/h, its power was fading. Kia's performance was throttled at 2%, and the accelerator had less punch. After 55 kilometers at 7% battery, we had 2% left. Warning signs intensified, and even quiet cats like the VW became more forceful. After falling below 5%, the BYD lost its remaining range. Instead, it stressed charging and cut output from 190 kWh to 120 kWh. The car displayed a turtle symbol at 0% battery life, indicating severe power constraint. Even when performance dropped, it could reach 100 km/h under some situations. The most exciting element of the test was when the battery indicated empty, yet the car kept driving. Despite the battery being dead, a tiny emergency buffer enabled partial driving in all versions. However, acceleration was greatly decreased. All electric vehicles operating past 0% battery survived this endurance test, traveling for 10 kilometers at 100 km/h. Performance steadily declined after that. When engine power dropped to 25 kWh, acceleration deteriorated, and it felt like the vehicles were dying. It seemed like a natural fall, as if the batteries were squeezing out every last bit of energy. One motorist called it driving on empty, saying the Kia EV6 kept going despite limited acceleration. generating 13 kWh of power when over the projected limitations. It appeared the system was allocating what the battery had left rather than following a shutdown routine. No big alarms or flashing symbols, just a subtle power decline. Even with 10 kWh, the car crawled at 64 km/h. The performance faded slowly, but the experience was serene and tranquil. As acceleration fell, the Kia could no longer sustain 50 km/h and stopped at 78 km on the speedometer. Post 0% BYD and VW vehicles traveled farther, but eventually stopped. After 16 km at 50 km/h, the BYD unexpectedly switched to neutral and coasted to a stop. After reaching 0%, the VW ID.3 drove at 140 km/h for 10 km before rapidly declining to 5 km/h before becoming unresponsive. Both shutdowns felt imminent, yet they ended unexpectedly. After stopping, the automobiles were switched off and rested. Restarting most models failed to re-engage driving mode. Only the Neo restarted and drove farther at 20 km/h. It took 10 seconds to reach 20 km/h with full power after being switched off and restarted. Electric vehicles generally don't come to an immediate stop when the battery display hits 0%. In fact, all the models tested had a hidden buffer that allowed them to continue driving for a short distance after reaching what appears to be empty. Most EVs were able to travel an additional 15 to 20 kilometers after hitting 0%, which offers a bit of reassurance for drivers who may occasionally cut it close. However, the way each vehicle handles this low battery state varies widely, and this can significantly affect the driving experience. As the battery level drops, many drivers change their behavior, becoming more cautious and alert. Some brands help reinforce this by issuing frequent and noticeable warnings. Tesla, BYD, and Volvo vehicles, for example, become increasingly vocal and persistent with alerts as the charge gets low, urging drivers to find a charging station. On the other hand, vehicles like those from Kia and Neo tend to reduce power more quietly, which might feel less stressful, but can also leave drivers underprepared for an imminent stop. That said, not all EVs are equally forgiving once they hit the end of their buffer. BYD and Volkswagen models were observed to shut down more abruptly, giving drivers little time to react or pull over safely. This unpredictability can lead to frustrating or even dangerous situations, especially on highways or in busy traffic where sudden loss of power can cause blockages or accidents. The main takeaway is that all electric vehicles have some form of safety reserve beyond the 0% reading, but how that reserve behaves differs from one brand to another. Some cars gently taper off performance, giving clear clues that the end is near. Others seem to run normally until they suddenly stop. That's why it's crucial for EV owners to familiarize themselves with their vehicle's specific low battery behavior. Understand how and when it begins limiting speed, how loud and clear the warnings are, and just how far you can really go when the dashboard says you're out. Even though this test confirms the existence of a buffer, it's not something to rely on regularly. External factors like cold weather or an aging battery can reduce the buffer significantly, making it unreliable. It's always smarter to plan ahead and charge well before you hit 0%, no matter what your EV brand promises.